Welcome to the Artist Work Ethic Podcast. I'm Mike Pelak. I'm a screenwriter and filmmaker who's always looking to maximize my time and potential as I work to break in. In this podcast, I talk to artists of all kinds who have seen success in their fields about their process, habits, and work ethic. My guest today is Heath Saraceno. Heath played guitar for the New Jersey bands Midtown and Senses Fail. He was a founding member of Midtown, and they toured the world with the likes of Fall Out Boy, Blink-182, Gym Class Heroes, and New Found Glory. After Midtown, Heath went on to join Senses Fail later in his career, and lately has had a renewed interest in making music, which we talk about in the episode. All right, Heath, thank you so much for coming on with me today to talk about your work ethic and your habits. My first question for you is, when Midtown was still playing locally in Jersey, what was your vision for taking the band to the next level, and what steps did you take to put that plan, into action?
Well, thanks for having me, Mike. I'm looking forward to talking to you about all this. When Midtown was starting, we were all in college. I was going to Raritan Valley Community College, and the other guys were going to Rutgers in New Brunswick. I lived about 15 minutes away, 20 minutes away from them in New Brunswick. I lived in Somerville at the time. Their schedules were all really weird. No one really had morning classes, and everyone kind of stacked all their classes towards the end of the day, which meant that they would wake up very late, go to school, and then just hang out at night. We started working on a schedule where they would do all their classes in like the early afternoon, do their schoolwork, and then we would practice at like 2:00 in the morning. So we would meet at Big Noise rehearsal studios in New Brunswick at sometimes, midnight, sometimes 1, sometimes 2:00 in the morning, play for like 2 or 3 hours. And then I would go home. I would sleep for 5 or 6 hours, wake up, and then go to my job at the video store. I'd open the video store at 10 and work there until about 6:00. Go home, catch a little nap, and then do it again at night. I think we would do that 3 or 4 nights a week at times. And it was, at first, it was really exciting keeping that kind of a schedule. So you really feel like an artist, but it was just the only time that we could all get together and actually spend the time to focus on what we were doing. And then once we started practicing, we knew we wanted to play a lot. So we would, you come from the same scene, so you know how it was back then. Every weekend, there would be about 4 shows.
Yep.
4 or 5 shows, 2 on a Friday, 2 on a Saturday, 1 on a Sunday. We would try and get on as many of those as possible and just play all the time.
So there was a real dedication and work ethic on your part and your band members, in that even though you guys had jobs and school, you still made it to the rehearsal studio at 2 a.m. And that takes a dedication that I think is important for anyone trying to break into a creative discipline of some kind.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a fun schedule, but we were young, we were in the right place at the right time, and we all saw something that we wanted to put the extra effort into.
Once you guys did break in, and we'll call it, things got a little bit more comfortable, maybe, you had more of a team around you, and maybe there was a little bit less of sleeping on a van floor, tumbling across Nebraska. How did you personally and the band, how did you manage to maintain that focus and continue to write music at a high level while balancing everything else you had going on?
I think towards like the middle to the end of the band, when things got kind of comfortable, we also got comfortable. We didn't have the same type of rigorous practice schedule that we had when we were starting out. And we toured so much that playing every night was our practice. So we would tour for 2 or 3 months, come home, disassociate. And then before a tour, we practice a couple times and go through the motions and reconnect to that muscle memory that we had from touring the last few years and months straight, and just kind of reconnect with each other as a band. So there wasn't quite as much practicing at that point, but there was a lot more, I guess, relationship building. When you're living with the people in a bus or in a van for months at a time, you have to learn each other's quirks, and it's kind of like being in a relationship with 3 boyfriends.
Sure.
You know what pisses them off, and they know what pisses you off. And
yeah,
You know that it's going to be a lot better of a tour if you can stay away from those things.
Did you find that you spent much time together outside of touring to continue writing or make plans for the future?
Yeah, we would hang out here and there. We would sometimes we'd meet up at shows, go to things together. Tyler and I lived really close to each other for a while. We lived like a town away from each other. So we would meet up sometimes during the week when we were home, like go to the mall and buy ridiculous shoes or get like lunch or something. And as far as practicing and writing, it would really depend on where we were in the album cycle. If we had just put out a record, we weren't going to meet up 3 times a week to try and write songs together. We would just be touring and get kind of burnt out doing that. And then towards the end of that record cycle, we would start coming together again and focus on writing and kind of treat that as a different part of our band, like a different function.
You talking about touring makes me think, in order for you to accomplish what you were able to accomplish, there had to be some kind of sacrifice along the way. What is something that you feel, obviously we're a few years removed from this at this point, but what's something that you feel like you sacrificed along the way, but felt that it was worth it to have accomplished the goals that you set out to accomplish?
That's a hard question. I mean, the thing that we realized immediately was that we were just going to miss a lot of birthdays. We were going to miss a lot of graduations. We were going to miss a lot of anniversaries and weddings, things like that. So I missed a lot of that. I missed a lot of family life the first bunch of years that I was touring. And that was something that we knew that we were going to do right away. And, we felt like this was the only time that we can do what we wanted to do and focus on being, a working band. We can't fly home for graduations and birthdays and stuff. Although I did fly home for one graduation, my now wife's college graduation. But everything else, I missed it. I missed literally everything else while I was on tour.
Even with everything that you did accomplish, both in Midtown and then later on in Senses Fail, as nicely as possible, I'm sure it wasn't everything that you had dreamed of. And there was some kind of failure along the way, even in the shadow of your successes. When you did feel that occasional sting, what was something that you told yourself to continue pushing forward despite what might have been a even temporary setback?
Some of those things were, you come up playing with a lot of different bands, right? And, when you started as a band, and these other bands started, you remember being on bills with them when they were opening the show. And when they only had 3 songs and when they had their old bass player or their old drummer or whatever. And then as things progress, you start seeing sometimes those bands just blow up and get gigantic. And you're always like, fuck, man, why isn't that us? Or why didn't I join that band? Things like that pop up and there's jealousy. But then you have to think about all the other bands that you're that into.
Yep.
Like the band who started 3 years before you, that you started begging them to put your band on their show. And now you're off touring the world and they're still, in their garage in South Carolina.
Yeah. And I've talked about that before, in that I think so much of this is reshaping your perspective and taking some kind of thing that you might consider, a tough beat, and realize that there's probably someone else out there would love for that. I mean, just thinking of myself, some of the scripts that I've written have done, I don't know if you know much about the screenwriting world, but there's a lot of it is competitions. You enter a script and, it can advance into further rounds, to eventually be a winner or not. I remember a few years ago when I was first writing, I would never advance anywhere, blanket non-advancements. And then, more recently, I think as my writing has improved, that stuff has started to come along. Things have blossomed out of those. And even where I do, and I don't want to harp on screenwriting competitions the whole time, but, even where I do get knocked out in a later round and kind of feel bummed about it for a day, it's one of those things where, I've just got to take that perspective, reframe it in my head, and realize that me 4 years ago would have been stoked to be at this point. And it's kind of that same thing with you and the band, in that there would be tons of other bands that would love to have been in that position.
Yeah, and it's all work. It's all practice. The whole time you're doing that, you're learning your craft. You're picking out things that you like about your style and you're honing them. let's say you did win one of those competitions on your first script. What would that have done for you? You know, you would have been in a place where now you think that you can't fail. Every single idea that you have is gold. You don't refine things. Yeah. You know, you have to get punched in the face a lot in order to learn how to avoid being punched in the face.
Yep. And I think that's a great anecdote in that, you know, even thinking that prior to, you know, Senses Fail in Midtown, you were in, I mean, I know you were in at least Nowhere Fast before that. And I'm sure you didn't start the band with the thought of, let's have this not really leave New Jersey. And you were able to get that done, get it out, and, you know, move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up playing in bands. You know, I've been playing guitar since I was 13 years old, and I started playing with my friends. The entire reason I ever picked up a guitar was because my friend wanted to sing in a band. And he's like, I have a bass. He's like, why don't you just borrow this bass and learn how to play the bass, and then we can maybe play some songs together. And then we found someone else who played guitar, and after a couple of weeks it was decided that I should play guitar and that other kid should play bass. Then I started playing guitar and formed a bunch of bands with my best friend. And then we thought we wanted to be Dream Theater. So we learned how to play pretty well for 15-year-old kids. We realized that we couldn't do that. And then I got into punk rock, and I saw that this was something that like I could probably do. But it wasn't until we formed Midtown that I thought I could actually like go on tour and maybe be like a musician.
Just to kind of wrap this up, I would really want to thank you for coming on and talking about this and giving some perspective for me and for anyone listening. Just to wrap it up, is there anything that you're doing these days that you want to talk about or plug?
Yeah, I think over the last year, I've been much more active in music. I didn't play guitar for probably about 9 or 10 years, outside of a couple reunion shows. In this time, like a couple friends approached me about a couple different projects. One is our mutual friend, Christian Lesperance, Jersey Interchange. My friend Dave DeGuire approached me about doing some acoustic songs last year, which got me like back into actually learning to play other people's songs again, like learning songs verbatim. And singing, playing guitar. And I'm doing a couple other projects. I have a project right now with a bunch of friends. We have a bunch of songs written. We're not really ready to put anything out yet, but something will be happening in the next couple months.
Nice.
And the biggest thing that I've learned over the past year about being creative is just when someone approaches you with an idea, humor it. Like just listen to it and say yes and see what you can add to it. And if it goes nowhere, and some things that I've tried have gone nowhere, and they didn't work out, and I just didn't, you know, it just wasn't for me, or, you know, like I felt like I couldn't add anything to the project, but other things set me up for future opportunities.
Sure.
You know, like I just started learning how to use GarageBand and Logic again out of nowhere. And that came in really handy pretty recently with this new project. So, you know, I think that if you want to be creative, then be creative. Then just do what you can. Do what you can do, and try and learn and try and figure out what you can do to be better at your craft.
Agreed. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Heath.
Thank you, Mike. It's good talking to you, man.
You too.
Be good.
Thank you so much for listening today. Please subscribe to the Artist Work Ethic podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, and please rate and review the show. Follow us on Instagram at The Artist's Work Ethic, and check out theartistsworkethic.com.